Hi guys, my name is Alexey and I'm here today with TheSalonGuy shooting a cool textured one-length blunt bob video. So we're gonna get right into it. I have this pretty cool model right over here, and she has this natural wavy texture hair. This is pretty standard kind of texture that you find on clients that want to have their hair just wash and go. So this will be a wash and go style that you can then put some more wave into, or wear it straight, or just kind of get it tousled, put some dry shampoo in there and go out into the world. So we're going to get started. I'm going to section her off, and we'll be right back. So we sectioned off our model, and the sectioning that I like to do is start off with a layer section on top. I like to clip up the graduation section and cut the perimeter three-dimensionally around the hair. We're going to be doing a dry haircut on her today just because I can see how the natural texture falls. I can see where the cowlicks are. I can see where the density lives. And it's a much more visual approach when you're doing more lived-in, subtle kind of textured hairstyles. So we're going to go right in and cut off some of the length first. I'm bringing the comb straight down onto the hair. I'm doing very little tension, and I'm creating that line with the comb. I'm bringing the shear straight in and cutting off that length. Now cutting off the length first, allowing me only about an inch of hair to work with as I'm going to be putting in the shape, just makes it more manageable than creating the shape at the same time as cutting off all the length. So once I chopped off that bulk, I'm going to go ahead and cut in my first perimeter length section, and I'm going to use a razor. Now, I don't like using razor on dry hair all over, but creating that first section makes a diffused line, especially on the perimeter, which tends to fall really heavy underneath the nape. I'm going to pick up the hair, and with the heel of my razor, I'm just going to shave down on it. Now, I'm not doing these wide scoops. I'm not shaving the hair going all the way down because I don't want to break up the cuticle and make it frizzy. So I'm really just taking small strokes and slightly moving the razor up and down to create a diffused perimeter line. After I've created that initial perimeter, I'm going to take a smaller tapering shear and point cut into it to make sure that the line is even. Now when I establish the length, I can go around the head and make it even going all the way around. Now to keep a blunt but diffused line, I'm picking up pieces, pulling them down with slight tension, and with my shear, I open and close it with the hair being in the back of the blade to create a diffused but straight line. This approach makes the hair seem more lived in, as opposed to a fresh cut that tends to fall more blunt. After I cut off and establish the length, I can go in with my comb, bring it down with slight tension, and point cut to make sure that it is precise. So an important part of cutting hair in general is scissor control. Scissor control is something that you should be working on throughout your whole career. The thing that you should start practicing from beauty school on is making sure that when you open and close the shear, the still blade stays still and the movable blade is the one that's moving. With this, you'll be able to get straighter lines and more precision. Another important part to scissor control is when you're point cutting hair. And when you're point cutting hair, you want to make sure that the blade lands in the same spot every time so you don't cut yourself. Another important aspect of this is to make sure that you're not closing the shear as you're going towards your hand so you don't hurt yourself. And this approach, when you get it down with muscle memory, you can cut really, really fast without injuring. So we're going to continue establishing the length. And I'm going to be using the same technique I used on the other side, opening and closing the shear, using the back of the blade, and creating that diffused perimeter. Now, when I cut bobs, I tend to create a slight A-line in the front, even if it's a one-length blunt shape. This allows it to make the face seem more of an oval, and it works on generally most face shapes. So after I've established that length, I can go ahead and put my comb in and make sure that it is precise. And once I put the comb in, I see the line that I've created with it. I can go ahead and point cut any extra hair away. You can press the hair onto the neck with the back of your hand and point cut right on the neck to make sure that it's a nice and even line. Your comb is a really important tool. It's a tool as like a sculptor has when they're using it to work the clay, and they also use it to make sure that lines and shapes are even. So when you're using a comb, you want to step away sometimes, hold the comb against any line that you're cutting, and to make sure that it is a good guide to where you're going with the haircut. The next section I'm going to cut is going to start graduating the shape. Even though it's going to appear blunt in the end, I still want to create shorter and longer pieces which make the cut slightly bevel under. So as I drop a section of hair, I'm going to subdivide this, making the section manageable. I'm going to go ahead and cut off a lot of that length, giving myself maybe an extra inch to half an inch to work with. And then I'm going to use a tapering technique. A tapering technique basically creates little arcs or C shapes underneath the hair so that when the hair falls, it bevels slightly under. What I use is the tip of my shear to pick up the piece of hair, and from underneath, I create that taper. Now the movement of the shear goes in an oval or an arc, and as I'm moving it towards my finger here, I'm closing it, just taking away slight C shapes or curvatures in the hair. This collapses the section slightly onto the previous section to create a more beveled look. After you taper some of the hair away, you can bring the comb down to make sure your line is lining up, and go ahead and point cut some of that away. The tapering technique also works in sections that are a little bit thicker. So right behind the ear, there generally lives a lot of bulk. Right here, you can pick up this section of hair and taper it until it collapses to the density that you want. And you can repeat the same step on the other side. So I'm going to drop the second part of the graduation section, cut off a bunch of that length. And for cutting off bulk or length, I like using a 7-inch shear. It just makes it much easier to get rid of that. I'm going to bring that section over. I see it slightly overlapping where we left off, and I'm going to continue tapering the hair. As I'm tapering, I'm moving my fingers back, and I'm chasing the shear with them, which creates that longer point, which then I can come in and point cut away, which leaves it one length, but with a slight graduation. Even though I'm using a guide with this, it's not a visual guide, it's a guide by using your sense of touch. So as I pick up a piece of hair, I feel the other hair starting to fall out, and that's where I know where I'm cutting. After I've created that slight bevel, I can bring my comb down and go ahead in and point cut it away. I'm going to continue tapering into the side as well to get rid of that slight length and put a little bit more texture into the bluntness of the line. I'm picking up the hair, pulling it towards my chest, and tapering underneath. Another technique you could do to break up the line is picking up that section horizontally, seeing where the weight is, and using a scooping technique. Now when I scoop the hair, I put the shear straight in, and as I work up, I'm removing some of that bulk. But I'm still leaving that overall length. I'm going to go ahead now and go into the next section, which is the parietal and part of the layers living right in the back here. As I drop everything, I'm going to use a larger clip and create a mohawk section with my fingers, which allows me again to work three-dimensionally around the head versus cutting the back first and then the front. This just allows more balance for the haircut. Consider dry cutting like sculpture. You're working three-dimensionally and creating the shape everywhere as you're going along. And the difference from wet cutting in some regards is when you're cutting wet, you're following a template and you have that shape in mind. With dry cutting, it's a combination of architecture and sculpture where you're creating a foundation and then sculpting everything to that shape. I'm going to go ahead and cut off a lot of this bulk and then taper back into this one length style. As I'm cutting the length away, I'm again leaving it slightly longer than what I want the end result to be. And for this, I like using a one length, a wide comb so that I can bring it down and use it as a guide to my previous line. The wideness of the comb keeps the tension really light, so the hair won't jump up. I can see where my previous section is. I'm going to pick up the hair and taper underneath. After I've tapered this next section to the one length, I'm going to go ahead and start picking up sections and breaking them up. Now when I break up the section of hair, I pick up a horizontal section. I can bring it straight up. See after my tapering where any of the weight still lives, bring the shear straight in and scoop up to break up that line while still leaving a one length shape. And I'm going to go ahead around the head to create and mimic the same look. I'm going to drop the next and final section. We're going to go ahead and cut off a lot of that length and then taper and do some point cutting to blend everything together. I'm going to put in my wide-tooth comb, bring the comb straight down, see the line that I want to create, making it slightly longer than the previous section, and coming in and taking off that length. By making the section slightly longer than the previous one, it creates a slight undercut, which then I can work with to refine the shape. After I've established the length, I'm going to go ahead and taper and point cut pieces away at the same time. So as I pick up a section of hair, I can see where the previous sections are falling out, pick the length that I want to create, and to make sure that it falls where I want it to, I can just bring the hair straight down, and where my fingers are pinching it is generally where the length is going to be established. So scooping up the hair, tapering this piece, scooping up the next section and using that as a guide, the previous section as a guide now. I'm going to go ahead and do this around the head. Again, this breaks up some of the bulk and makes the hair bevel under. So when the client does the hair themselves, it'll fall much easier as opposed to flipping out everywhere. You're setting the direction and the movement and with how you want the hair to fall and to dry. After you work around the head, you can come in and start scooping out and point cutting the hair. Now, I'm going to take pie sections starting from the crown of the head. I can pick them straight up, see the shape that it's taking, cut off any of the extra hair. I want to leave all of this length, but what I want to do is break up some of that weight again. So I'm going to bring my shear straight in, and opening and closing the shear, I'm going to scoop the hair out. This scooping technique allows the hair to fall and collapse on itself, which also creates that beveled shape and makes it easier for it to air dry. And this whole style is supposed to be effortless. It's supposed to dry and be a cool, shaggy, blunt look. It's almost like she did it herself at home, but she has a good eye. As I'm scooping out the sections around the head, when I pick up a section, I want to make sure that the perimeter is left out. This way I can keep that blunt, straight line still. For the top part of the layer, even though the perimeter is blunt, I want to cut off just this point. Cutting off this point at the top of the hair here will create a slight bounce. It'll create a little bit of volume and movement so that it elongates the back and makes it a graduated shape. I'm going to go ahead now and point cut away the perimeter to make sure there's any little flyaways, and then we'll see you right back to style it. So I went ahead and point cut the perimeter to make sure that it's even everywhere and that any of the little flyaways are cut off. Now the last part of it before styling is you could do a little bit of detail work. And the detail work is you want to look at the shape and see where any of the heavier pieces are. Like this, you could be able to break it up to make some more texture and pieciness so that when she styles it, it won't fall like a curtain in her face. So to create that, I'm gonna still keep this perimeter blunt line, but I'm gonna pick up pieces here and I'm gonna scoop and taper slightly deeper in. So while holding that point, I'm gonna taper this piece of hair until I have that weight that I wanna see. You can also break up the line by tapering it away from the face if you want the hair to smooth back. If you'd want it to fall towards the face, you would create those shorter pieces behind it, so the shorter pieces would push the hair forward. Now, the one piece I didn't leave super blunt and even is just the front, because I want to create a little bit of character and a little bit of personality just by leaving a couple of points right in the front. You can go ahead and pick up the layers to make sure that there's not too much of a difference and any flyaways are cut off. And then I love it just messy and tousled, but another way to finish it off is you can just take a curling iron and with just random pieces, create a little bit of a gentle wave. So you don't actually want to curl the hair on the iron, but what you could do is wrap it around, close the clamp for a second in some opposite directions. And this just creates a beachy, tousled look to redefine the curls. It's almost harder sometimes to make the hair look natural and not too contrived when you're curling or styling. You have to know that with this technique that less is more. And if it still looks a little bit messy, then you just want to use a little serum at the end, a little product, a little maybe dry shampoo to finish it all off and bring it together. The points you also want to leave out. You don't want to put the ends of the hair into the iron because you want to leave them straight to leave some of that defined texture. Now we're going to use a little bit of TheSalonGuy serum. Work it through the ends, a little bit underneath as well. And for a little more texture, just some dry shampoo. And you can pick up random pieces with your fingers just to give it a little bit of lift while spraying that. And that's the finished result, a blunt, yet broken up, shattered bob. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Salon Guy for this look, and I hope to see you guys again soon.